afternoon, students. In this class, I'll be talking about Age of Chaucer. And this class is divided in two parts. In the first lesson, I'll be talking about Introduction to Chaucerian Age and three main events. And in lesson 2, I'll be talking about Geoffrey Chaucer. So without wasting time, let's get into the video. So first, I'll give you introduction to Chaucerian age and three main events which happened during this period. And in the next part, I'll be talking about biography of Chaucer. So coming back to lesson 1, which is Age of Chaucer, its major introduction and background. Chaucer was born when social, religious and political changes were taking place. And during this period, church was on decline. Now remember, three major events which took place at this time are Hundred Years' War, Black Death and Peasants Revolt. So we'll be taking these three events in detail. Let's start one by one. So let's start from 100 Years' War. I'll be explaining these three events in detail, class. Starting with 100 Years' War. This war started in 1337 and it ended in 1453. Now this war continued between France and England. And this war was over the land holdings that France had of England. Now see, this war was over the land holdings that France had of England. Now, I'll take you back into the previous lecture where I was talking about Norman conquest. See, this war happened due to land holdings. And students, in the previous lecture when I have covered Norman conquest, during Norman conquest, William Conqueror became the King of England in 1066 AD. And he united England with France. So what happened when he united England with France? He ruled both the areas, France as well as England. And what happened was that England's land holdings came under this king, came under France. And this battle happened when the forthcoming King of England demanded that their land should be brought back to them from France. But they didn't agree. So what happened? They both engaged in war and they decided, okay, let's fight over the land and whoever wins will get the land. So this is 100 Years' War. And you need to remember in brief that it started in 1307 and lasted till 1453. Land was over the major land holdings of, war was over the land holdings of France and England. And this war helped in creating English identity. So this was overview of 100 Years' War. Now discussing the next event, that's Black Death. See, Black Death is also called as plague. Now this plague is caused through rats. And this is called so because it turns the skin black. So it's called Black Death. And this Black Death was a pandemic. It took a huge life and almost 1/3 of Europe's population was eliminated. So what happened? Like agar koi bhi dukh hota hai, people used to pray. So they were praying, but they were not able to save the life of their beloved ones. So what happened? They lost their interest in Christianity and people began to question the healing powers of Christianity. So what happened? It led to the development of medical science. At this time, medical science and education developed because people thought that prayers are not doing much. In fact, they have to look for answers into the science. So this was the period when development of medical science was also seen. discussing our third event, that's Peasants Revolt. Now, students, Peasants Revolt is also called as Wat Tyler's Revolt, and this was great popular rebellion in English history. Now, we have already read about the Black Death, and in Black Death, it took huge toll of life. So at this time, peasants were paying huge taxes. So peasants were paying huge taxes to the government, and this was the time when they got burdened and the peasants revolted, and this is what we call as peasants revolt. I hope all the three events are clear to you. Moving further to lesson 2, I'll be taking you through Geoffrey Chaucer. Now students, going through this lesson 2, Geoffrey Chaucer, Geoffrey Chaucer is known for his works, that's Canterbury Tales. This is very important work which I'll be discussing in my next lecture, and I'll be making a complete video of the Canterbury Tales. You can go through this video also. And Geoffrey Chaucer was outstanding English poet before Shakespeare and the first finder of our English language. His work Canterbury Tales is very famous work, and he's also called as father of English literature. And students, he was the person who saw the rule of three kings, Edward III, Richard II, and Henry IV. Now, through his father's good connections, Chaucer got entry into the royal courts. And when he got entry into royal court, he married Philippa de Royt, who was lady in waiting to Edward's three wife. Next, he also took part in Hundred Years' War, but he was mistaken as a prisoner, and that is why he was imprisoned. And King Edward III paid huge amount of ransom to get him free from there. Then Chaucer also made many diplomatic missions, and when he traveled to Italy, he discovered the works of Dante, Boccaccio, and Petrarch. He discovered the works of Dante, Boccaccio, and Petrarch. Moving further, students, I'll be talking about his works now. So Chaucer's work or Chaucer's period is divided into three parts: the French, the French stage, the French part, the Italian part, and the English part. So I'll be talking about all three parts in detail with you. First part is French stage. In French stage, when he traveled to French, I have already told you he took diplomatic missions to Italy, French. So when he traveled to France, he wrote the Romance of the Rose. And Romance of Rose is an allegorical poem. Also, the text is divided into fragments. Together, the fragments A, B, C provide translations of 1/3 of this work. So see, अगर आप इकट्ठे करो इन फ्रेगमेंट्स को A, B, C, तो आपके पास 1/3 आता है सिर्फ इसका. तो स्कॉलर्स टुडे जनरली अग्री कि फ्रेगमेंट A जो है दैट इज़ अट्रीब्यूटेड और दैट इज़ डिवोटेड टू चॉसर. एंड फ्रेगमेंट C अगर आप देखो तो आप उसमें चॉसर के स्टाइल देख सकते हो लैंग्वेज में और किस मैनर में उसने लिखा है. और फ्रेगमेंट C जो है मेनली डिफ़र करता है कि किस तरह से उसमें राइम्स कंस्ट्रक्ट की गई है. एंड फ्रेगमेंट्स A एंड C के अंदर लंदन डायलेक्ट यूज़ किया है, वेयर एज फ्रेगमेंट B जो है वो नॉर्दर्न डायलेक्ट को डील करता है. तो आई होप आपको ये क्लियर हो गया होगा. अब हम चलते हैं अगले पार्ट पे. अगला पार्ट जो है हमारा, अगला जो वर्क है चौसर का वो है बुक ऑफ डचेस. तो बुक ऑफ डचेस जो है चौसर की मेजर पोएम थी. और चौसर ने प्रॉब्ली ये पोएम किसके लिए लिखी थी? टू कमोमरेट द डेथ ऑफ ब्लांच ऑफ लैंचेस्टर हु वाज वाइफ ऑफ जॉन्स। नेक्स्ट, अब ये जो पोएम है बुक ऑफ डचेस जो इन्होंने लिखी थी, दिस पोएम बिगिंस विद अ स्लीपलेस पोएट. So what this poet was doing, he was sleepless and he was reading a book. So suddenly the poet falls asleep and dreams of a wonderful story. And he dreams that he wake up in a beautiful chamber by sound of hunters and hunting dogs. And the poet follows a hunting dog into the forest and find a knight who is dressed in great clothes. And he was mourning about the loss of game of chess. The poet asks the knight some questions and realizes at the end of the poem that knight was talking symbolically instead of literally. The knight has lost his love and lady. The poet awakes and decide कि ये जो incident है, ये जो dream है, this should be reserved in rhyme. So what happened? The poet was dreaming while he was reading a book, and suddenly he falls asleep and take a beautiful dream in which he was woken up by the sounds of dogs, and the dogs lead him to a knight who was mourning over the loss of game of chess. And when the poet asks the knight some questions, and then he realizes that the knight was talking symbolically instead of talking literally. He was talking in the form of symbols, and the knight has lost his love as well as his lady. So the poet awakes and thought that this should be reserved and this should be written in rhymes. So this is all about the book of Duchess. Now students, taking you to the next work, which is Italian Stage. And Italian Stage he has written the Parliament of Fowls. The Parliament of Fowls is also called as Parliament of Brides, Assembly of Fowls or Assemble of Fowls. And this poem is one of the first reference to idea, and through this poem you'll get to know the importance or how Valentine Day came into existence. So this was idea about Saint Valentine's, that how the Saint Valentine's Day is celebrated. So this plot is about a narrator who dreams and he passes through a beautiful scenery, and Dame Nature sees over a large flock of birds who are gathered to choose their mates. So what happened? Birds have gathered to choose their mates, and the birds have a debate while three male eagles were trying to seduce only female bird. And this debate was full of speeches and insults where birds were insulting each other, and at the end none of this male eagle was about to win the heart of this female eagle and about to seduce this female eagle. So the dream ends, and this is how Valentine's Day came into existence, that this entire plot was about love, how three males were seducing a female. So this is how the day is celebrated, and this work is called as Parliament or the Gathering of Fowls or Assembly of Fowls or the Parliament of Brides. Okay students, taking you to the next work. Next work we have is in the English group. So the English group contains the greatest of achievement of Chaucer, and in this work we are going to deal with Canterbury Tales. So Canterbury Tales is English work of Chaucer and is the most celebrated work of Geoffrey Chaucer. There are two prose tales in this Canterbury Tales: Chaucer's own tale of Melibee and the Parson's Tale, and nearby all others are composed in powerful and versatile species of decasyllabic or heroic couplet. So we'll be dealing with this Canterbury Tales in detail because this is very important for net point of view. And in the next class, I'll be talking about Canterbury Tales in detail plus the important tales which are asked in net. And we'll be talking about some major points which you have to remember for Canterbury Tales. So till then, just revise these lessons, and in case you have any doubt, do comment in the comment section below. I'll promise to solve all the doubts, and